Hello and welcome to the Green Collar Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Jose Almanzar, a practicing environmental attorney and former environmental scientist. This podcast is all about exploring careers in sustainability in the environmental field, what they look like, how to get started, and how to grow into them. Each episode, I sit down with professionals who have built meaningful careers in this space to hear their stories, how they got started, the challenges they faced, and the advice I have for anyone looking to break in or level up. Whether you're a student, a career changer, or just passionate about making a difference, these conversations will have something valuable for you. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Let's dive right in. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Jose Almanzar, and today I have the pleasure of having with us Adam Flint. Adam and I spoke a few weeks ago up at Binghamton University at a career panel for environmental and renewable energy careers. And right afterwards, I said, Adam, I got to have you on the podcast, man. And I don't know. I think
Great to be here, man.
I think he might have been delusional or exhausted from the program because he agreed right away and he's followed through. Adam, how are you?
Doing well, Jose. Looking forward to the warmer weather.
Yeah. Well, anyone that's been to Binghamton understands that Binghamton has like a really, really beautiful 8 weeks. And then everything around 8 weeks is just like gray and cloudy. So Adam was lamenting before this that the weather just hasn't been compliant. But warmer weather ahead, I think, Adam. So where are you currently? You're not in Binghamton or Vessel at the moment, are you?
I am actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I was able to arrange it so I could be at home to do this. So it's a little bit calmer. So,
Very nice.
You're at home.
Very nice. And your role right now, you're the director of clean energy programs at NEST, which is the Network for a Sustainable Tomorrow, right?
Yep.
All right. So tell us a little bit about NEST. I looked you guys up. It seems like you're doing incredible work throughout not just the state of New York, but I think inspiring other programs. But what is NEST?
So we've been around since 2008, and I guess you can put our work into a few buckets. The first is in terms of what we focus on locally. We help largely residential folks get clean energy improvements on their homes. We're not contractors, but you could think about this from your perspective as a homeowner. You want to get a new HVAC system. You'd like to get some heat pumps, or you need insulation, or you want solar. What do? You go online, and there's a whole bunch of names, and you just have no idea. So we are funded to be able to help folks with that by talking about how the technology works, what incentives are available, what the process looks like, the value propositions, some of the challenges, and also we competitively select installer partners that we work with. And so that's one thing we do. Another thing that we do that obviously we're going to talk more about in the rest of this pod is our clean energy careers programs. And I'll just quickly mention that we have a very successful Energy Corps Internship, because I know we're going to go into that. And we also try to reveal the secret, which is clean energy careers. And I'm really happy you're doing this pod, because one of the biggest barriers to filling the jobs that are out there is making people aware that they exist, that this field exists. It's not just for line workers and engineers, although we need those. Then there's a program that I'm very proud of called Binghamton Community Power. That's focused on disadvantaged and low-income communities currently in the city, but we're actively seeking funding to expand that. And there's 3 elements to this. We help people navigate the programs that remain at this point. It's not a great scene either in New York or especially in the country, but they exist to get those aforementioned improvements done. We're gathering data on repair and remediation needs, because that's a big barrier and we need programs for that. And then we do a lot of capacity building and education around how to do some DIY solutions for your home. That's particularly important for renters. How to deal with the utility, which is a really big deal around here right now. Our utility is awful and prices are through the roof. And we also talk about, how do you get into clean energy careers? And then there's a whole slew of other stuff that I mostly focus on, which has to do with regulatory affairs, legislative affairs, program development. So that's basically the short version.
Where if you could put your resources, if you could only put your resources into one of those buckets, because it seems like you guys are doing a lot of things, and I know for nonprofits, sometimes it's nearly impossible to make an impact across the way. If there was one of those activities that you were getting the biggest ROI, which would you say?
So I actually can turn two into one, because one of the strengths of our Energy Corps internship is that they do the work, right? So whatever I say I'm going to choose, they're going to be doing that. And what I choose is actually creating a Ratepayers United organization in our region. Because right now this is the biggest barrier to everything. It's killing the economy. It's killing people's pocketbooks. We have a utility that, frankly, is doing some things that the AG's office should look into. I personally spent almost 10 grand on electricity last year, and I'm not super an outlier, which is insane. I spend more on electricity than my property and school taxes combined, and that wasn't true 3 years ago. Something's wrong.
That's incredible,
It's bad.
especially for that part of for that part of New York. I mean, I think it should be relatively stable across the entire state, but particularly for the southern tier to have ratepayers pay upwards of $700 to $800 a month is incredible.
Yeah. No, it's
And
stable.
in addition to obviously not just utility prices, but gas prices, inflation, everything else, it feels like the middle classes is being pinched across the board.
It's basically being destroyed.
That's
So,
incredible.
yeah.
Do you do you feel that the path to a clean energy future is a more informed electorate, or is it more of like even above the electorate, like policy or market forces? Like, where do you stand on that?
I mean, I think that at the end of the day, citizens need to organize, not just elect. They need to do both, because the solutions required, and there are many to solve this problem, simply aren't going to be carried out by the people in charge right now. We have a governor who has declared herself the enemy of the climate movement. She's gutting the climate law. She's been doing things that even Trump has asked, and it's a bad situation. And we're in a state where, if you poll people, the policies that she carries out really don't represent the vast majority of what New Yorkers want. I mean, this is a pretty blue state at the end of the day. But we have a corrupt political system, and the only way to fix that is through political action. Now, the political action would then give you the power to pursue policy solutions and so forth. But right now, the good solutions are simply being ignored or destroyed.
Yeah, it's tough out there, and certainly small grassroots organizations, and I'll say small only because it's
Oh, we're
fiscally.
small.
No, and
We have allies that are very big, but together we are still being hopelessly outgunned by the fossil
Mhm.
fuel and utility interests, and that's why we're in this mess.
Yeah, but and I think the hope is that even with small funding that people can come together and pool resources. It's going to be impossible to go against big trade associations and big industries, but enough people coming together and making a unified front across different program areas, I think can move the needle, because certainly at the end of the day, and you know this, Adam, elected officials are really scared of two things. One is running out of money, and the other is not being reelected. Which one goes with the other? So, but anyway, we could spend all day kind of drawing on this, but I want to
Yes.
really go into an area that you brought up, which was your Energy Corps program. Now, I know this, and you've discussed this. You've hosted over 130 students, and in your words, you've called it, the most successful thing you've probably ever done in your career, which has been a long and very, very successful career. What makes this program work?
So there's a number of factors. I mean, at this point, given that the program has proved itself, one advantage we have as a mature program is that students at the university, Binghamton here, know about our track record. They know that if they get this internship, the likelihood of getting a job postgraduate is markedly increased. And not only in clean energy, right? We have alums that do all kinds of things, but we have a real critical mass that stays in energy, stays in the nonprofit or environmental world, and stays in the state of New York. In terms of what we basically do, we have certain criteria that allow us to choose really good people, strong communication skills, written and verbal. We need people who can learn fast, work hard, and they have to have a passion for the work. And we take people from every major, right? We have engineering students, we have Spanish majors, obviously environmental studies majors, management majors. And what these students do immerses them in different areas of the clean energy economy and ecosystem. So they are out there talking with people about these solutions. They're learning how to be in the world of work in a small nonprofit. They are becoming more familiar with sort of how to make things that can be a little complicated, intelligible to people who might not know anything about them. So these skills are cross-platform, right? You don't need those skills just to go into clean energy. You need those skills to do a good job at almost anything. And we also have developed systems that make this internship run well. So we have an internship supervisor. We sometimes have a lead intern, which is an experienced intern that we bring back for another semester. And we have structures in terms of what they do. So there's core areas of work, marketing, outreach, and customer support. And then depending on their interests and their skills, there's a long-term project that they carry out. That's something that they want to do. And honestly, this internship is something that we want to replicate. We'd like to get paid to do it, but we'd like to replicate it because it is a successful model. And it also does kind of the other thing that we're both here to do, which is it really builds the field in terms of workforce, in terms of careers, in terms of awareness.
Some of the capstone projects include, can you give me an example in terms of like the post-internship projects that these students are doing?
Well, they're not post-internship, they're during the internship. So something might be, very internal, like we have an intern that is devoted to the website. We have an intern that's devoted to fundraising. We've had interns do research on particular aspects. So that could be, for example, the work that we're doing around the need for repair and remediation. We're gathering data on that. That has to be analyzed. There's also research about other such experiences and other such research. So those are a few examples. So I think it's sort of a combination of there are operational things that need to happen for our organization to succeed. And then there are things that we're doing out in the community, out in the world, that involve research or other activities that interns can take on.
In terms of each semester, how many interns do you typically take? And then over the summer, how many do you take?
Yeah, well, think of it as three terms, really, including the summer. It's 4 to 5 usually. We've had more, we've had less, but that's kind of the sweet spot. In the summer, we always pay, and we pay 18 an hour. Sometimes we pay more. Like this semester, we've got more funding for the summer. If we have people we like and they want to stick around, we want them to stick around. So we've had interns that have been with us as many as 3 terms. We have interns that have turned into staff people. And we follow them, right? We keep track of our intern alums. We have a spreadsheet for that, and we keep in touch with them. And actually, recently we were having a real problem with funding, and we asked them for money, and some of them gave. So it's kind of a full circle. We now have interns that when they were working with us, were 18, 19, 20 years old, who are now in their mid 30s. So it is kind of a mature program. And we love to keep this going. We love to see other organizations, other universities and colleges make use of this, potentially even high schools. There's, different sorts of challenges there, because one of the things we count on, and we're fortunate, is that we have such an amazing pool of students who have these very strong skills. We're not really set up to work with students that don't have, for example, very strong communication skills. That's not something that we can teach them. They have to come with that.
Yeah, and in terms of you mentioned that you track some, your former interns, former students. What kind of careers do not necessarily are they encouraged to go into, but just what kind of careers do these students typically go into if there is a typical path?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll say, for obvious reasons, the ones that are in energy tend to stick in my head. One exception to that, there's a young woman who has basically been uh, being a parks person, right? She's done research, she's done guiding all over the Western parks, year after year, different parks. But in terms of the people that I know more intimately, there's one young woman who's working for a consulting firm that largely works with the New York Power Authority. We've got somebody working for National Grid. We've had people working for the DEC, for NYSERDA, and we have people working for organizations like our own. One of our early interns is working with New York Renews, which is the coalition that brought us the CLCPA. So they're, and I would say too, a lot of them work for contractors or engineering firms as well.
Very nice. So I'm going to encourage you to double down on not just keeping track with them, but also outreach with them. And the reason I say is this: in high school, I did a fantastic internship with the Nature Conservancy in New York, and I've mentioned this to the current staff and the executive director for the last few years. There needs to be a concerted effort with re-engaging with the former LEAF alums. It was a leadership program. It was an internship program for high school students. And the reason is this: I am now a solid 25 years removed from that internship, and I am a full grown professional, and I'm doing interesting things in my career and also able to broadcast my interest in different things to different channels. There's a certain kind of power that goes into self kind of feeling good, and also kind of power in having this collective group of people that had a shared internship or program, and the organization has completely missed out on that opportunity with us. Now, they have started to take my advice, and this June, so now next month, we have a board meeting, and we have a whole session on youth engagement and kind of re-engaging with some of those alum from the internship program, because they see the value of, hey, maybe we should have a dedicated email list, distribution list, that maybe once a month we just send them stuff and keep kind of people interested in the pipeline, and we can then share resources with each other. And then when the organization needs some money, they can send us an email blast and say, hey, kind of like what you did. But it kind of,
that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, it's kind of staring me in the face, because when I say we keep track of them, we ask them for testimonials, right? Pretty soon out of the box. And we also see, all right, they just changed a job, but why haven't we been sending them our newsletter? There's no good reason why we haven't been sending them our newsletter, and we could easily simply add them to our email list. And what we could do is assign an intern. Let's brainstorm what's something we can do with our alums.
100%.
Make it happen. So that's a great suggestion, Jose. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, I was talking with the head of environmental studies at Binghamton, making exactly the same kind of suggestion, because environmental studies program is now a department, as
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so we talked about this. Do something for homecoming, right? And yeah, so absolutely.
So one thing that I'm learning is that the companies and organizations that celebrate their clients and their people are the ones who really create a great brand. So imagine a year from now, a program, whether it's virtual or in person, Adam, where you invite as many of your internship alum to come back to just a celebration of them, right? And build this fraternity sorority that's on the nest Energy Corps Internship program. I mean, think about how fantastic
Great
that
idea.
event would be.
That's a great
Anyway, so my 2 cents on that.
I wasn't expecting great new program ideas, but thank you.
No, no, happy to contribute because I think it's important. A lot of those students are now probably doing incredible things. And
Oh yeah.
one, they have money to give to you guys. Two, they can broadcast your message even if they can't give. And three, they can within themselves create their own networks and subnetworks to share resources and jobs with each other. So it's kind of a living ecosystem. Um, okay, so you have two sociology degrees from Binghamton, not an engineering degree, not environmental science, but you led the design of a $52 million statewide clean energy program. So you have this kind of energy brain and coalition brain that does not come from this environmental background. What prompted, like, walk me through that process of like where you got the gumption to say, you know what, I want to develop this clean energy program, but you don't have this energy science background.
Well, in a way, it sort of comes back to the internship credentials and to the old, the old saw about learn how to learn, get a liberal arts degree. Well, yeah, that's part of it. Part of it is, biography and happenstance. I was feeling disenchanted with academia, towards the 2008 period. And if you recall, that was also a time when our country's economy collapsed because of the subprime mortgage situation. Obama administration pumped a lot of money into a lot of different things. Anyway, there were a lot of programs that were being developed at that time. And I connected with someone at Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County that's become a good friend and colleague that needed somebody. I was actually initially interested in doing local food, but I had this strange desire to make a paycheck. So I jumped into clean energy. I've always been interested in sustainability, right? So that was always lurking in the background. But it was, like what's his name? C. Wright Mills' biography and history. And I started with this career. So I tell this to anyone who will listen that I have this much formal training in anything to do with energy technology. Now, I also hasten to say I am not an energy technologist. I understand a fair amount about solar, about heat pumps, about energy efficiency, but I'm not the guy you send out to do an energy assessment and then design a system and build it. We work with other people to do that. But the reality is that one of the main reasons why this country is so far behind the rest of the world isn't because our technology isn't there. It is there. In fact, a lot of the technology was developed here and then we didn't really pursue it, right? That's not about the technology. That is about the human aspect, right? That's about social science and the humanities. That's about behavior, politics. We have a powerful set of interests that have discouraged us from pursuing efficient, clean energy solutions because it undermines their bottom line. And that disinformation also affects our political system. So it requires people that understand how to educate, how to bring people together, how to do policy. And that I know how to do. Now, as far as that program is concerned, that program also, I wasn't designing for example, large scale renewables program that requires a lot of technical knowledge. This was a program to create a statewide regional clean energy hub system to make NYSERDA more effective at outreach. Didn't go how we'd hoped, but there was a group of us that had worked with the agency for more than a decade. We learned a lot of lessons. And at the time, there was good leadership at NYSERDA that really wanted this. Unfortunately, things change, but that's really why I and my colleagues were doing this. And virtually none of them have engineering or building science background either.
Before we continue, I want to take a quick moment for those of you listening who might be thinking, I want to work in this space, but I don't know where to start. If that's you, I created something called the Green Pivot Map, a simple 90-day framework to help you clarify direction, translate your existing skills, and take strategic action toward environmental or climate work. It's not about going back to school or starting over, it's about positioning. If you'd like a copy, just message me Pivot on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at at josealmanzaresq.com. Or you can also check the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Now, you and you and I spoke about this briefly at Binghamton a few weeks ago, but you're a very passionate man. It comes, it's easily anyone that spends more than 5 minutes with you can see that you're a passionate man, and you're very empathetic to the plight of humans that are struggling. Um, have with respect, because you could have done a number of different things with your career, but you chose renewables and energy and kind of this environmental issue that we're all dealing with respect to climate change. Where did that come from? Have you
That's
been?
not actually all that mysterious if you know anything about my family.
Go ahead.
So, two generations of people who really felt passionate about justice, social
Mm,
justice. I'm doing climate justice on both sides of my family. My father's family comes from the Midwestern farmer labor tradition, and my mother's family, Eastern European radical traditions. So I kind of am apple not falling far from the tree kind of guy, not very mysterious in that respect. I was raised with this. And one of the things that is unfortunate is that we don't have an easy way for young people to get this kind of perspective unless it's from their family or friends. In other words, if you go to an average school anywhere in the United States, you're not necessarily going to learn how to be an active citizen, how to have the skills to organize, how to, convene, bring people together around a common cause. Part of that is civics, but we kind of haven't had that much in the schools for my adult lifetime and your entire lifetime. So yeah, the reasons why I have this is just, the fortune of being raised in the family that I was raised in.
And that speaks to the justice component. I'm going to drill down a little bit, but you could have gone into labor justice. You could have gone into economic justice. You could have gone into immigration related justice or some other human rights issues or civil rights issues. Why climate? Why environmental?
Yeah, well, that actually goes back to that pivot, right? Mid-career pivot.
Hmm.
Before I was doing that, I was an academic. I was actually focused on social justice and solidarity as concerns our relationship with Central America, and so more foreign policy. And I actually almost became an immigration specialist because Central America immigration is a huge factor in everything that goes on there. So really, it's almost accidental. It's the fact that the opportunity was available to move into this career at a certain time when I needed and wanted to make a move, and there was money available to be able to make a living doing that. I think, well, and I'll just say, I moonlight doing immigrant justice right now. So it's in my DNA. And I only wish that more people would at least do something, because if more people would at least, because there's a lot of people with good values,
There
but they
are.
don't do things.
There are, and what I'm starting. So I've been this podcast all started because I was having discussions with people like yourself in the careers in the environmental careers, and I would end up having interesting discussions that from them I would just learn how did they get to where they were, how did they develop their careers, but then I was having different conversations with people who understood that climate change and biodiversity loss are the two biggest problems, frankly, that could be facing human history in not so many words. And I found that these two groups of people were saying the same thing, but not to each other. And the latter group of people, the ones that were interested in doing this work, felt like they were incapable of entering the space. I'm talking about people that were maybe doing something for 5 or 10 years that was unrelated to environmental, but then they felt this pull or a passion to help. But then to them, the profession or the career just seemed so distant. It seemed like you needed to be a technical person or you needed to be a scientist. And my goal in this podcast, and kind of I'm saying this from the mountaintops, is like this line of work needs everyone. It does not need, like, certainly we need the scientists, we need the data people, but it needs way more than that. I mean, we need individuals that can do storytelling. We need communicators. We need people that can do policy and lobbying. We need people that can be the technicians. And so, you mentioned something in Binghamton a few weeks ago, is that any major can be relevant in clean energy. A graphic designer, a lawyer, an educator, but most people haven't even heard of these careers. How do we solve that visibility problem? How do we broadcast this to more people?
Yeah, so we're doing our level best with a program where we're going into schools and the community college and the university, essentially talking about, well, what are clean energy careers? And as you correctly stated, they draw from any area of expertise, pretty much. Where do you find these? How do you get them? That sort of thing. That's very nice, but that's very small bore. Now, I will say that we have an opportunity in New York State now for a couple of reasons. One is that state education recently has changed the graduation requirements, and one lesser known part of that is a climate requirement with no funding and no resources. And that was actually, the existence of that is due to some organizations that I know and have worked with that have been pushing because we don't have a climate curriculum. So now teachers and districts have an interest in including this. It doesn't necessarily say anything about careers. However, more and more districts, even ones that tend to focus more on the college bound, have become painfully aware that that's not good enough. You can't just focus on the college bound. And part of their challenge is that, for their guidance and teaching staff, they don't necessarily know what they need to know to help their students into a whole range of lesser known careers. So I think to the degree to which groups like mine and the state can really focus on the clean energy careers piece as this climate curriculum thing happens, that would be very important. And I will give NYSERDA credit because they have a new program that is going to start developing the website and the materials. They're going to actually have this very robust climate and energy curriculum hub. And we're actually part of one of the consortia that's bidding on this. And the end game here is that all educators, whether they're in an institution or not, K-12, beyond, whatever it is, should be able to go and find what they need to expose their people to these areas of work. And it will include career information in addition to the educational part. Because, let's say I'm a math teacher in 11th grade, and I need to use certain kinds of examples to get across certain kinds of mathematical concepts. Well, if somebody hands me a unit with all the materials that allows me to meet that learning goal with something that's to do with climate or clean energy, yay, right? Teachers don't have extra anything. So if we're able to give them sort of the plug and play and have some, professional development and support available, then we can do this sooner rather than later, because it took them 11 years to roll out the next gen science curriculum, which does not include climate in any meaningful way, right? So we have to be agile and do this in sort of innovative and thoughtful ways.
You're striking on something that I think is super important, which is the focus sometimes, and it's great, don't get me wrong, we should all take it where it comes, but the focus seems to be heavily on college and even post college, letting people know. And I think it's super important. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it seems even more clear now that it's just as important, if not more important, instilling some of these concepts in middle school and high school, because by the time a person gets to college, they may have already made up their mind as to what kind of career path they want to go to or what interests them. And we might have missed that window to really, I don't want to say indoctrinate, but really educate and expose them to some of these concepts of biodiversity loss, climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, et cetera. I had the fortunate, time, excuse me, time of attending a school in New York City called High School for the Environmental Studies in the early '90s and or the mid '90s, and I was able to, from an early age, um, be exposed to concepts of climate change, and back then when it was called global warming. And to me, I mean, that most of my friends who are working now, they're in the workforce, many of them did not go on to climate or environmental careers. But shoot, at 14, 15, 16 years old, we were getting educated on this stuff. And now as adults, we have an understanding and an appreciation for the situation we're all in. Um,
And you're embedded all over the place. And I think that's really valuable. I
yeah,
mean, I think we talked about this. You're in law, right? Other people may be in finance or in other areas, not actually focusing on this every day, all day, but having that understanding really sort of permeates the culture of different professions with that background, and that can influence other kinds of decisions.
I have a friend who is politically plugged into both New York City and New York State governance. I'm going to propose a discussion about a climate curriculum. That'll be for a different thing. But if there comes a time where I may ask you to join that conversation, don't be surprised if you get a call from me. You said something super interesting at Binghamton, which I've posted the video now on my YouTube channel. But you said that you were hiring, and as part of your hiring process, you collected a number of resumes, and some of them seemed like they weren't written for the job. Um,
That's a kind of a special circumstance. So there's a program connected with the university, the New Energy New York program, and they have a student startup experience, which hitherto has supported startups, for-profit entities. At a certain point, they decided, you know what, we're going to broaden that out. We're going to allow nonprofits, but the cadence of submissions from the students had already gone by, right? They'd already collected a bunch of resumes, and we were obliged to, basically they said, look, we'll fund a certain amount that you've chosen through your process. You're going to need to select a certain amount through our process. And so, we saw the resumes. These were resumes that were understandably designed for people who wanted to work at a for-profit startup, right?
uh-huh.
But what we found was we have a pretty decent interview rubric. And as we started to ask certain questions, we became aware that there was other things that these young people knew how to do that weren't on the resume because they didn't think it was relevant, because maybe it wouldn't have been if they were going for a startup. So that's kind of a unique experience. But I think maybe one general takeaway is that students that excel tend to have broader abilities than you might know, just from the thing that they're focused on, right? So, an example could be that this student had done all kinds of work with social media, which wasn't necessarily important for what they thought they were applying to. Or they've done a lot of educational work involving young people at camps or whatnot. And that wasn't really seen as relevant to what they were originally applying to. So I think maybe the lesson might be that people who excel in one area might actually excel in other areas, and you just don't know it. I mean, maybe that, I don't know how much your environmental background comes up at the law firm, Jose, right? I mean, how much do people, including your clients especially, know that you got all that if you're working on something completely different?
Right.
So I think that's kind of what happened there. I did want to get back to one other thing, in terms of the whole college bound business. I mean, one of the realities about how this country has gone off the rails in the last 4 decades is that we really denigrated non-college bound careers, trades especially, but also, we offshored manufacturing. And that's come back to bite us in a lot of different ways. And so it's just absolutely critical that we have young people who, have the skills at an early age, have the interest, that they can pursue this. And those careers can be clean energy careers. They don't have to be, right? So you can be an electrician and not go near clean energy, but you can also do a lot with clean energy. And so, getting that into the newly revived trade and manufacturing tracks, if you will, is super important. And even though right now we have someone in the White House that is, a major enemy of many good things, including clean energy and climate, and we have a governor who is maybe not on that scale an enemy, but certainly is not supporting these things. The market is happening, right? These things are happening. They're not going away. The rest of the world is going gangbusters on this. So these careers may not be growing as fast as they would have been if we had had different electoral outcomes, but they're still there and they will continue to be there. They will continue to grow regardless of the political climate. There's not as many jobs as there would be if we had had other outcomes, but there's still jobs.
Not only are there still jobs, but the need is only going to continue to grow in the trades. And I'm going to mention two things anecdotally. One, I had a conversation with, actually, she works in ICERTA. She's an attorney in ICERTA, and she lives in the Albany region. And we were speaking maybe about a year and a half ago, and she wanted to upgrade her home to a heat pump. She could not find a contractor for 6 months to do the work. There's a high demand. High demand and no supply of workers that can. There's only so many certified, HVAC people that can actually know how to install those. Second thing I'll say, I had a conversation just a week ago with an environmental engineer that I know, and she's the current president of a groundwater association, a national groundwater association. And she mentioned a study that by 2030, we will have a shortage of 100,000 positions of workers that are qualified and knowledgeable to drill water wells.
Oh, yeah. No, we're in big trouble with that.
Yeah.
Big trouble. Because those are the residential well drilling business. It's family.
Mm-hmm. And
there's family, and there's not enough people.
So to your point, yes, college is for a lot of people, and certainly you and I both went to Binghamton. I had a fantastic experience at Binghamton, but with certainty today, I can tell people that a bachelor's degree alone is basically as good as a high school degree was maybe even 20 years ago. Like it's not, it doesn't prepare you for work, and certainly the market has plenty of people with BAs that you're just one of 50, 100 candidates for a job that might be out there. I think for people who want to work in the space and want to learn technical trades, I would hope to see more programs that can do dual tracks where you can get a bachelor's and also learn some trades along the way, almost like an apprenticeship bachelor's model.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Because I think getting people, because imagine you graduate with a bachelor's and maybe you're not necessarily qualified, or just the market again is saturated with people with bachelor's degrees. I was just having a conversation with a young woman who had a master's from a very good school. She can't find a job. 18 months she's looking for work. She can't find it. And she went directly from undergrad to her master's, and she, we were having a conversation, and she asked me, what am I doing wrong? And I said, you're not doing anything wrong. There's just, for every one of you, there's 100 of you. So I think getting people doing things, what a concept.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is not anything particularly shocking, but it's always been the case that if you're able to get internships where you're having concrete experience doing the thing before you leave, that is huge in a number of respects. One is you've learned how to operate in the world of work in a professional environment in something, right? Obviously, it's better if that internship has you doing a lot of substantive work as opposed to, the equivalent of filing and typing. But the other thing it does is that it's a networking opportunity, right? You know this. The reality is that when I look at my own career and the career of most people I know, the opportunities that I have ended up taking came not because I was just qualified, which I was, but because I had made connections professionally. And one thing that we do always, whether it's in high schools or anywhere else, is look, relationships are kind of everything. Obviously, you do need to know how to do your job. That matters a lot. But just knowing how to do your job often isn't enough. You really need to establish relationships. So we were talking earlier about the alumni. I mean, here we are, the organization that hosted the alumni. We're having a financial crisis. We reach out to the alumni who help us, right? It goes full circle. And so making those professional connections, it's just so important at any stage. And I know you were also thinking of talking a little bit about mid-career folks.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a whole segment, and I mentioned, some of the conversations I've been having, and part of, why this podcast is so, at least to me, important, because it's to inspire and activate people who maybe haven't been doing traditional energy or environmental work, but something is pulling them towards this work. What kind of advice would you give to, somebody who's 10 or 15 years in finance or communications or tech, but hasn't been doing environmental or energy or clean or renewable energy work? Like, what advice would you give them on breaking into the space?
In a way, it's not that foreign from the advice for, newly minted degree people, except they're coming in with a lot of experience in their field. Let's pick on finance, right? There's somebody who's doing finance for something else. There's no shortage of, for example, need for people who can do project economics, who do project finance for large scale renewables, wind, solar, battery storage. There's also government agencies, consulting firms, there's utilities, etc. All of these people hire finance people, they hire management people. This is a big industry like any other. And so you're going to need people with those skills. So then the question becomes, how do you find out about that? Because your networks are not there. You're essentially going to need to network your way into those worlds. And chances are you went to college somewhere. And it's actually not that hard to tap the alumni networks. I mean, right now you can do it through LinkedIn all by yourself. Some colleges are better than others at helping people. And typically they're helping, they're looking to you, the mid-career professional, to give them money. But I think that there should be a little bit more of a two-way here. There should be the opportunity to be able to go back to the institution and say, hey, look, I want to move. I want to make a career move. I don't want to leave accounting, but I want to stop accounting for, this industry that doesn't interest me anymore, or whatever. And so can you help me with that? But yeah, I mean, you need to do that networking. If you happen to live in a larger city, you can actually, slip into a conference, right? And there's online conferences as well. No shortage of those. So really it's another form of networking, except you're walking in with mid-career professional credentials in the skill set. Maybe you need to retrofit that skill set in order to do this job. But then the question becomes, if I'm hiring for that job, that probably looks reasonably good if I can't find somebody who has everything I want. Right.
Yeah, so you're tapping. I mean, you're tapping into the framework that I've developed over the last few months, kind of looking at all the interviews that I've been doing on this podcast, and pulling out the kind of the hidden gems from the conversations. And the first thing that I encourage people is, first you have to do an audit, kind of an inventory of your skill sets based on what you've done with your career. And that's a very intentional thing. You can't do that passively. You have to sit down and not just go through your resume, but also go through, what are people coming to you for to solve problems? And if you are someone who's in finance, and what are all the things that you've been doing in finance? But then there's other skills that you're not even seeing because you're kind of too close to the situation. So take a step back and do this inventory. Then you kind of have to translate the skills into language that matches the environmental or energy industry that you are trying to get into. So there's kind of a process to do that. And if you do it with intention, you can then start kind of crafting your resume and your cover letter and the way that you communicate about your skills in a way that sounds slowly and gradually like you belong in this energy climate environmental space. You can kind of gradually do it. And then the other component, it's two-part. One is 100% networking. And to your point, alumni and conferences, those are the low-hanging fruit that I tell individuals. Join a trade association in your community, or just join one that's maybe not in your community, but be intentional and then go occupy space in that space. It's not going to happen behind the computer, you just kind of clicking away and reading articles. That's important too, but you kind of have to be out in the wild. And then the other component that I think is, again, it takes a little bit of work, but if executed properly, you can start. There's never been an easier time to publish. You can start publishing things, and you don't have to be an expert in clean energy systems and technology to start publishing about things that interest you in the clean energy space. And you can write it from your vantage point in whatever space you've occupied in your career. And so kind of putting all those things together, I advise people, it's not going to happen instantaneously, but if you give yourself a few months, and I've seen this happen in real time, Adam. I've taken somebody who was a civil litigator, passionate about environmental issues, came to me wanting to break into the environmental space, and we applied this same framework. And in less than a year, Adam, she was being asked to speak on panels as an environmental law expert. And then in less than a year and a half, she was offered a very nice position at a think tank for a clean energy and climate change think tank. So there's a way to do this, and it takes a little bit of work, And I'll get.
Sounds like a really effective methodology. And I think another thing that can often be lost is that when you're coming in from the outside, you're bringing the fresh mind. Because sometimes things get a little insular, anywhere in any sort of workplace or career. If everybody there has sort of come up the ranks, if you will, and if you have somebody that comes in lateral and they're like, "Oh, this is interesting. Why are you doing it that way?" And people are like, "Oh, well, how else would we do it?" And they're like, "Well, why don't you try this?" Little fresh mind can oftentimes be really energizing for a workplace or a field.
Yeah. So Adam, we're running up a little bit on time here. I want to be respectful of your afternoon. I just want to ask you maybe one or two quick questions. First of all, when you're not involved in Nest or dealing with Binghamton or students, like how do you spend your time? Are you reading anything that's inspiring right now, or listening to any interesting podcasts, or watching anything? Like, what are you consuming these days?
Well, so actually, one of the things that I'm doing is being very physically active. My partner and I do a lot of biking, and we're going to do some swimming once it warms up a little bit. I'm also very into yoga and gardening and so forth. I'm also a pretty good violinist / fiddler, and we love to go out and see live music. My job is rather consuming, and I spend a lot of time in front of a screen. I will say that I am pretty addicted to the Volts podcast, like a million other people.
Yeah.
Dr. Volts definitely has carved. I mean, he interviewed. I'm forgetting the fellow's name, but the billionaire that's running for governor of California, who's actually the most progressive person in the race.
Okay.
So he's made the big time with that podcast, and it's well that it is a challenging matter to do a good podcast.
Well, I'll definitely check that out, and I love the fact that you're out there doing things, because you're right. I know with me and you and I have different work, but we different professions, but we it's so consuming, and sometimes just doing stuff is therapeutic.
All right.
Just moving around. The last question I'll ask you, Adam, for people that are sitting on the sidelines and care deeply about the planet and the state of the environment, but they don't know where to start. Do you have any final words for them?
Yeah, I guess I'd say two things. One is that what paralyzes us sometimes is we look out there, things are not good, right? That's a fact. But the reality is you can't predict the future beyond all doubt. And there's a radical priest who's a friend of mine that talks about stubborn hope. Have some stubborn hope, because honestly, if you think that nothing we do will matter, then you're not going to be able to do anything. That's kind of a given. And if you don't do anything, then it's almost a guarantee that we'll all fail, right? So that's the first thing. You need to put yourself in a mindset where, despite all of the horrible news and that reality that's out there, it's not over. And then the second thing is, do something and do whatever it is that is going to give you a little bit of joy, whether that is because it's a local group that is out in nature and you're going to be doing that. Maybe that's what floats your boat. You're more of an ecosystem outdoor sort of person. Maybe you're interested in advocacy. There are no shortages of organizations that exist already. You don't need to start a new one. In fact, I would discourage you from starting a new one until you know what's out there. And in this day and age, post-COVID, when there's a lot of remote and virtual participation possible, there's any number of groups that work to change policy in Albany. Right now, it is pretty much state capitals because of the state of Washington, D.C. Obviously, Sierra clubs are out there. There's groups that are dedicated to, we've got a campaign called Renewable Heat Now. We talked about heat pumps and so on. There are groups that are working to make sure that the water in your community is not polluted, or if it is, that it gets cleaned up. So find something you can do with people, right? If you have a friend that you can do it together, maybe both of you have been feeling discouraged. Say, all right, you know what? The two of us, it's sort of like we're going to keep each other honest at the gym. Well, keep each other honest in the environmental movement, right? You're both going to do something together, but do something.
I love it. I love it. No, and it goes back to the theme of if you have something that is pulling you towards this, don't ignore it. That's a sign that you care, and lean into that. Adam, you're a gem, and I'm looking forward to continuing to have this conversation with you. Certainly, if you find yourself down in this part of the state, hit me up. I would love to spend an afternoon with you. And certainly, my plan is to re-entrench myself at Binghamton. So you'll probably see me at some point later this year. Everyone, Adam Flint, he's over at the Network for a Sustainable Tomorrow, NEST. Look him up. LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch with you, Adam.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Also, our website is nynest.org, and I'm there on the contact us area or about us. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest and most direct way to connect with me.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this wonderful conversation. Everyone, Adam Flint, look him up. Hope we all have a great day. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Jose. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks for listening to the Green Collar Careers podcast. If you're realizing that your current work no longer fits, or you're feeling pulled toward environmental or climate work, but aren't sure how to make the transition, you're exactly who this podcast is for. I've developed a simple framework called the Green Pivot Map. It's designed to help professionals reposition their existing skills and take intentional steps into environmental careers over the first 90 days. You can get a copy by messaging me Pivot on LinkedIn or visiting my website, josealmanzaresq.com, or you can use the link in the show notes. If this episode was helpful, please subscribe, leave a rating, and share it with someone else who's trying to build a more purpose-driven career. I'm Jose Almanzar. Thank you so much for listening. This is Green Collar Careers.